the recording. Welcome to this afternoon's focus on the treasures of the SOG, or treasures and collections, indeed, of the SOG. This afternoon, Elsa is going to enlighten us about the armed services material that the SOG holds. Elsa is the genealogist at the Society of Genealogists. She teaches regularly in the SOG's education program, as well as at overseas events and conferences, focusing on genealogy before 1837. And with that, the floor is yours, Elsa.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, as Malcolm says, this is part of a regular series that I do in conjunction with the library and archives of the SOG to focus on what we hold and how you can find them. And today I'm going to be trying to fit in an awful lot of material that we have at the Society relating to the armed services. I will be happy to take any questions. If you're listening live, then you can put questions in the chat function of Zoom, and if you prefix them with 3 question marks, that means it will stand out as a question, and we can answer it when I come to the end of the presentation. I will give everybody a copy of the slides, particularly useful for this case because in this particular instance, most of what we have in the library is remarkably extensive, but more from printed books than within our archive and special collections. And so invariably, the best way to find it is to have familiarity with the library catalogue, which you'll find from the pathway of the website to search our collections, and there you can click on that to search the library catalogue, or you can use the link to the library catalogue from the specific library pages of the website. It does mean because it's printed books, most of the material would need to be ordered in to the library prior to you coming to view it as a visit. And again, all the information about ordering in material, whether it's books or any of our collections, into the library is on the library pages. But most of what I'm talking about today, being books, are stored off-site with some notable exceptions. So let's get into what we've got in the library for the armed services. And indeed, for the armed services, we generally mean obviously the Army, the Royal Navy, and the RAF. Of course, that will include the Royal Marines, and I suppose it could be the auxiliary services as well, down to the Merchant Navy as well. But that's the generality of what I mean. I think it's fair to say, because a lot of what we hold in the library is based on printed book material and has very much focused what there was to buy in as a section for the armed services, which really is, as printed books, is probably one of the largest sections. When they were on the open shelves, it was certainly, a good fifth of what we had in the old upper library. So it's not, many thousands of books within for me to sort of, I'm certainly not going to list each one, don't worry. But I think because of what was in print and the nature of some of the interests of our members, that the focus on the armed services does tend to be a little bit more towards the officer class than the squaddy and able seaman type status. So the kind of things you'd expect us to have would be all the guides and information of finding, what records there are, and then name-rich source material, such as good runs of the officer lists for the Army, Navy, and RAF lists, particularly good collection of regimental histories and medal rolls, naval biographies. Not a huge amount of our collection is online, but I will talk about our Army biographies database, which is actually something very special and unique to the Society and created by one of our members. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of the collections that have arisen through the printed books really have come about because of either the interest of one particular member, Nicholas Newington Irving, who really made a concerted effort to find printed source materials, subscribe to periodicals for us, and just generally take this as, you know, for us to house the military library he would love to have if he didn't live in a studio flat. So I think that's why so many thousands of works really have come into the library with donation from Nicholas Newington Irving, and I think I really ought to acknowledge his support. But it's not the only one. Certainly ranging back to our some of our former librarians with specific interest in the military, such as Lieutenant Colonel uh, Percy Smith, um, who had interest in the army and particularly the army and India. It's fair to say we have material for people who served in the armed services, whether it's in the British Army, the Indian Army, whether they served in former colonies, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. There is something to be found in our library relating to that. So I'm just going to give you sort of the skimmed, edited highlights of what there is to find. Um, we have access, of course, to all the major genealogy websites within the library, but not at home. So certainly what's online through Ancestry, Find My Past, The Genealogist, My Heritage, etc., you can access. I suppose the big lacuna in our collections for anything online is really Fold 3. I'm really concerning. I haven't seen an institutional library access to Fold 3. It's possible we might be able to negotiate that, and maybe with the advice of experts like Graham, with the new publications such as the Second World War rolls, which are medal cards, which are coming online now, and other Second World War material. Maybe really is the time that we might be able to sort of negotiate that. I'll see what I can do, and we'll see what we can do. But we've obviously got the major genealogy websites. Of course, we're a Family Search affiliate library, which means anything that Family Search might have of microfilms and then hence digitized, you can view at the Society's library as well. And of course, because we encourage people to write up their family histories, to compile family histories, and of course, we include amongst family history a lot of biographical and published biographies. Those are this is something you would certainly want to start using. So all of this material is really sort of focusing on the printed book and having familiarity with our library catalogues. So you'll see lots of sort of lists and subject headings and things and searches that you can do as I go through the talk to try and identify them. Having said, of course, that we have, oh, everyone's turned their phone off apart from me. Sorry about that. Do apologise for that. This is what you do when you're at home. You forget to do things like that. So, of course, with the access to the internet, things like the W97 records, First World War service records, medal rolls and things like that. Those are sort of the basic things that you'd expect to find online. If you've got access to them, that's fine. And of course, we'll have those in the Society of Genealogists. And prior to them going online, we did have the microfilm. We had copies of all the microfilms of W97, and we haven't actually got rid of them from the library yet. So if the internet ever does go down entirely, we still got a set of those in the library film collections. So as I said, starting with the guides and textbooks, you'll find some of our own Society of Genealogists publications, such as My Ancestors in the British Army, My Ancestors in the Royal Navy, My Ancestors Were Women at War. Those are all freely available in the SOG members area for gold members, as to view as digital books, or you can purchase them as Kindle books from on Amazon, or the hard copy from the shop. They're all available on the SOG shop, and you'd expect us to have all the guides to telling you what records there are to find, whether it's for the Army, Navy, militia, etc. So whether it's formal guides issued by the National Archives, popular guides directly directed to for genealogists from publishers like Pen and Sword, for example, or if it is perhaps more academic publications as well. Those are the kind of things that you will find. So again, there is a section, a subject guide, which is just, for example, Army General uh, uh, guides, textbooks, etc. And you'll find those through all listed in the library. And again, some of the standard ones on the quick reference shelves at the Society. I'm going to start off really with what we've digitized and put online through the SOG digital collections known as SOG Data Online. When you go to the search our collections tab on the website, you open up that and you see that there are the various pathways that you can search from SOG Explore, which is the platform we're moving over to our old platform, SOG Data Online or SOG Digital Collections, or collections as the tab says. Not everything's been migrated from the SOG old platform onto SOG Explore yet. So I'm just going to remind you that you can still, while it's still not falling over and although it is still a little clunky, you still use SOG data, digital data from the website. And if you browse through those, you'll see various sort of subject headings, and there is a section for armed services. So if we were to click on there, you'd see that that means we've digitized bits from the library relating to the Army, Royal Service, and the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy. Not a huge amount. This platform was really a snapshot of what we have in the library and how we could learn to scan and digitize, maybe make books browsable to search by home, or to index records, have databases, and and so just to prove that more of a concept that it works, but so we're taking all the data from this and moving it over to the new platform, and we hope that will be ready just after Christmas. But so some bits haven't gone quite over yet. So if I was to click on to say, well, what have you what's available online from the Society that members can view at home? Some things are digital copies of books, such as an early army list from the 1790s, or the Rochester St Margaret's militia list, or a regimental history from the Surrey Rifle Volunteers Association, a name index to a book that didn't have an index prior to that, which annoys some of our members entirely, that they actually thought, right, we're going to make an index to this. And so sort of very typical, some of the sort of instances of some of the broad range of the things we have for the Army from the library. Though I want to particularly draw your attention to a database called Army Biographies in the SOG library, which was compiled by Nicholas Newington Irving, as I said, one of our members who really was an ardent volunteer, spending all his post-retirement life in the Society as a counter volunteer, and particularly indexing things that drove him mad. And in this case, it was the fact that we had so many periodicals and reference books that mentioned people by name, that he thought there ought to be some accumulative database bringing all these together. So what he did was to create the Army Biographies database, and I'll explain how that works in a minute. There's a few things digitized from the library for the RAF and Navy, but just absolutely tiny. One name index to a book, another one is a women in the Women's Auxiliary or Air Force name index that somebody put together, a couple of digitized books. Normally, when we digitized a book, they were so fragile that we say, well, is this a way of making some of these books available to browse and read from home? Again, so not very much digitized there. So let me go back to what I think is probably the most important thing to look at online from the Society, the Army Biographies database. We put it online in around 2010. And it's something that he'd worked on for a good 5 years. And he'd really worked his way through pretty much every history in the library, the periodicals, um, making an index to the people who were mentioned within them. And So here, for example, I've just pulled out for the name Carter. There could be a biographical notice taken from an article in Family History Monthly, for example, not necessarily an academic military periodical, but a genealogical publication where someone had done an article about Private Harold George Carter, who'd been shot at dawn with some of his letters, etc. Or there might be something in the Journal of the Society of Army Historical Research relating to Thomas Carter, um, and a manuscript history of the Cameronian regiments, the list of etc. So he thought if there was biographical notices or in articles, he really ought to bring them together. And it was really a labour of love. It's not in any way that we claim it's exhaustive or absolutely everything that there is. But again, things that interested Nick. And again, it's fair to say that because of the nature of the books he was looking at, there be quite often would be more of the officer class. So an article, in this, for example, in in an American genealogical journal, the Kansas City um, genealogist, and a biography of Colonel Larkin G. Carter and his friendship with the famous Indian chief Black Hawk between 1767 to 1838. So odd, esoteric, broad-ranging, but just biographical snippets that you brought together with someone's interest in the armed services. Now, a lot of the armed service material has been moved over to SOG Explore, and until the all record sets listing comes in after Christmas, I find using the categories for armed services and again selecting down to Air Force, Army, Militia, Navy, etc., will bring over a lot of the things we've indexed and put online in the old platform. But sadly, the Army Biographies database hasn't been migrated over yet. So use the old version until it gets onto SOG Explore, and then you'll be able to search that database by name on SOG Explore shortly after Christmas. So that takes us really from what we've put online, say only a tiny minuscule part of what we have in the library, um, to leading your way into the books. And in order to do that, you need to do some searches in the library catalogue. So, for example, if I just put army in as a search term, well, there's over 2,431 army separate catalogue items that come up. And thanks to Nick, you can do very specific searches. So you could search for what we have on a particular regiment, and invariably that's a regimental history that I'll come to later on. So pretty much all the regimental terms are there that you could search in. So that's something useful within our library um, that you can search on. And we have things that cover the armed services generally. So if you did a search for sort of Army General, whether it's history of the Afghan wars, published Army biographies, um, how to research Army cap badges, what do you know, what charities might support the Army. Again, printed source material that you'd expect us to have. Those are some sort of just general parts from the Army General shelves. Again, we tend to include Royal Marines within the Army. And of course, there's a lot of sort of general information about regiments per se, rather than specific regiments as well. But again, Army prisoners of war, for example, lots of guides, books, maybe even listings of them. So quite a wide sort of disparate collection of general items relating to the Army. And again, one section within that you'll see is Army lists. That's a mistake. I'm going to get that one corrected. That one should have had just missed out the hyphen when someone was adding that to the catalogue. But there's over 1,000 what we call Army lists within the Army collection. So, for example, for army lists, I'm sure as you know that the army lists date back to the 18th century, so pretty much annually from about 1754, quarterly from the late 19th century, and often from the end of the 18th century, indexed by names, and really giving you biographical service information about published in book form about officers in the armed services. In this case, the army lists. And then we've got a pretty good run of army lists from the 18th century, whether it's the official army lists or the Hart's army lists of officers. For the earliest one I could identify in the catalogue was from 1756, going right through to the the latter part of the 20th century, taking us up to about 2000. So again, we've got a huge run of these because they're so large, and we've had to sort of reduce our physical footprints. These are all off-site in store, and you can order them in if you want to do a search through them. The guide to ordering material is on the library pages of the website, and it does say that you can order up to 5 items at a time. But if you want to do a huge search, so I want to go through the army lists for a 15, 20-year period, you will probably see that the army lists, when you look at them for the years you want, well, these 1, 2, 3, 4 army lists are all in the same box. And so by 5 items, we generally mean, 5 boxes. So if that would be, this would count as 1 item, even if you'll probably find you've got about 20 army lists in 1 box. So again, that might make it easier for you to call them in and view them at the Society's library. Actually, we have, moving on from the sort of official and semi-official lists, we have a very broad definition of what we would call army lists, and listing them as army lists in the library catalogue. So that might be anything from, Stuart Reid's lists of officers and regiments from the from the Royalist Army, those who received um, uh, compensation and support after the restoration of the monarchy, known as the Indigent Officers List. That's his version of that. We've got a copy of that. So I suppose one of our earliest army lists of 1663. And of course, Charles Dalton's lists of the English Army and Commission Registers from 1661. Again, we've got the 5-volume set of that in the library, the kind of standard army listing that you'd expect us to have, and we count those as army lists, so not just like the official army lists, but similar listings. Sadly, only one of our army lists is online, the list of officers in the Army and Marines from 1790. Again, we hope to digitise more at some point, but because the National Archives has digitised so many, and you do find them through the Internet Archive, etc. They're not the most pressing, but we do find people that still like to go through them manually, and so we've got no intention of getting rid of these just yet, but they are in store and you'll have to order them in. We do have similar listings for Navy, of course, so we've got good runs of naval biographies. Going back to the 17th and 18th centuries, some of them published for things like the Navy Record Society, and good runs of the more established Navy lists. Really, for us, really from the beginning of the 19th century was where our strength in these lies. And again, you need the box number and order that box in if you want to view them in the Society's library. More modern, coming up, of course, into more modern times, we do have a number of more modern Royal Air Force officer lists, whether those are for the periods around the war and the interwar years, or indeed the retired lists coming into the 20th century. We've got a fairly good run of those as well. Some of the general items that you can search for that you'd expect us to be able to have for the Royal Navy. So just for Royal Navy, we've got over 1,200 separate catalogue entries within the catalogue relating to the Royal Navy. You can drill down to some more specific subjects, whether it's in the history of the Admiralty or the Admiralty Courts or Navy agents. Sometimes crops up as an occupation, and what's a Navy agent? Quite a lot of information about how you research and look for Royal Naval surgeons, and indeed over 500 Navy lists. As I said, similar listings of officers, and again, those all listed in the catalogue. So moving on from the name-rich resources for officers in the armed services, one of the things we specifically have really collected over the years have been army regimental histories. And we have over 1,000 of those. Again, you can search broadly, just browse through, which we have using that subject heading there, or you can search for a specific regiment in the browse by subject term there. As I say, it's a term that you'll find that we've put in. And these can range from histories of a regiment of how it worked and what happened to it during the First World War, such as an account of the 5th Green Howards at the Battle of St. Julien during the Battle of Ypres in April 15, the Barnsley Pals, Lancashire regiments. I always find those quite poignant when you see a history of a Pals regiments, or whether it's going back to records of the Royal Artillery, or historical record of the 1st Royal Regiment of Dragoons, or the historical records of history of the Middlesex Yeomanry going back to the 18th century. Again, regimental histories are something we've been focusing on, and interestingly, as a feature for November, and as part of our remembrance of activities, the library has brought in a large sample of our regimental histories to put on the special featured collection shelves in the Society. So while normally you'd have to order them in, you'll see that the catalogue is describing these as the library featured collection. So for the time, but for a short while, the regimental histories are on the open shelves at the Society of Genealogists, and we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and all give their shelf mark as on the feature collection. There's just one that's still off-site. I know that hasn't got a box number, so someone's got to check that. I think they forgot to just change the shelf mark on that one. I'll get that. The librarians have a look at that and see if we can track that down and give it its right shelf mark. Again, I was just browsing through, and some of the interesting things I noted were the army registers. And I thought, well, what were these? Well, of course, we had microfiche copies of the old GRO index to things like the GRO army marriages within British lines, or the regimental birth index notices. All of these sort of army indexes for general registration that were the supplementary indexes to GRO. These are, of course, integrated into Find My Past and Ancestry, etc. But I still sometimes find I have to go back and look at the fiche versions of them, and they've been a bit iterated a bit oddly. I did like the fact that we had a copy of the GRO press book, giving the list of the regiment's corps and departments which have records of marriage, birth, and baptisms and deaths at the Registrar General, because of course the births and deaths are indexed online, but the marriages aren't. But you can still, by using the press book, identify which regiment has marriage records lodged with the General Register Office. Ordering them is a bit of a challenge through the online website, but it does work. And again, that press book is still quite useful, following up records at the General Register Office. And again, broadly for the armed services, not just the Army, but the Armed Services General, we have a section which I call medal rolls. But actually, when I go to look at the catalogue, we actually put them down as medals, and there are 246 catalogue entries relating to sources for those who received medals, or understanding the history of medals, or how you research medals. You can search for under some specific medals, such as resources we've got for anyone that might have the VC or the Distinguished Conduct Medal or the George Cross, for example. But again, a broad set of published works, whether it's the information about the 1914 Star issued to the Royal Navy and Royal Marines, or the Africa General Service Medal, which was given to the Royal Navy and Royal Marines, the Abu Klea medal rolls, and the Camel Corps. So some of them quite specific and idiosyncratic, or some of them quite general, as how who received the Army of India medal roll from 1799 to 1826. So again, a lot of these are published. Who are recipients of these medals? What were they? How were they issued? These are what we might call the medal roll section, and again, a very large collection of in the Society's library. For the Air Force, I was surprised we've got, over 500 separate catalogue entries of things relating to the Royal Air Force, whether it's something relating to a specific squadron or a squadron history, I suppose, and those would be probably within the regimental histories. You'll be fine that it's a broad term for histories of regiments and histories of squadrons, or whether you want to find a history or information about the RAF's Central Flying School or whatever. These are some of the search terms you'll find in the library catalogue. And again, you'll find 215 what we call RAF lists, again, officer lists, etc., in that broadest term, not just the official ones, but some which are name rich with lots of RAF members listed in them. We, of course, as a sort of formal library, have always subscribed to many of the periodicals and journals that you would expect. So we have things such as the Naval Records Society publications, the Chatham Dockyard Historical Societies. I just here looked for which ones we had under the Navy periodicals. There are plenty of Army periodicals as well, and these were often the resources that Nick Newington Irving used for his Army biographies. Now I want someone to go through and do the same. Perhaps do this as a good broad general trawl over our Navy periodicals, as we've got so many of them. That would be a good project for someone to work on. You never know. But again, so anything like whether it's if you the fact that there's a how you research and naval courts martials and what they're about. The Navy Records Society will have listed those. An index to birth, marriages, and deaths that appeared in the paper, the Naval Chronicle, from 1799 to 1818. Again, donated to the Society, privately published and given to us. And of course, we encourage people to write up and publish and put together their own family histories. And we have thousands and thousands of compiled family histories and biographies within the library. These are currently being scanned in partnership with Family Search, and these will eventually be available to view on SOG Explore. But it does mean in the meantime that they're all off-site. So if they haven't been scanned yet and viewable at the SOG library until they go on SOG Explore, you'll need to identify the box number and we can bring it in. But again, many of our family histories have focused on the service career of an ancestor. So, for example, we have here the diary of Robert Douglas, who was a London bus driver who served in the First World War, and his descendants have put together and published his own personal First World War diary that they found within family papers, and that's something that's gone within our compiled and family history and biography section. Some often within what we call the bound family history tracks, offset pamphlets and short reports, for example, where someone's done a report on an ancestor they've given to us. These can I did a search just of what family histories of what do we have for family history and Royal Navy, and a lot of these are sort of biographical notes on people, whether it's Boatswain William Tarrant of the Royal Navy or Charles James Tyers, a schoolmaster who served in the Royal Navy. Again, and some of them with the sketches going back to the 18th century. So most of what we have relating to the armed services are really through printed resources in books, name-rich resources within the Army, Navy, RAF collections. Not a lot of material online on our website yet, but that is likely to change. And to be honest, when searching through our manuscript collections, I really didn't find a huge amount. I can search on keywords and sort of because a lot of the old paper lists have been scanned as searchable PDFs. Not, I didn't find anything really that cropped up with Army and Navy and Air Force within the manuscript collections. So I suppose it's only going as far as something that might go to the auxiliary services. You may be aware that we publish a book. My ancestor was in the Merchant Navy by Chris Watts. And Chris Watts was a professional genealogist who works at the National Archives and who specialised in researching merchant naval seamen. And his professional case papers have come to us. And so the Chris Watts collection is really mostly people he'd researched who were merchant seamen. But other than that, I can't find a particular special collection that we have that relates to uh, armed service families in general. A lot of the individual special collections and people's individual collections in manuscript material on their own families, which might contain family papers and diaries and artifacts, need to be much better listed. And that's a retrospective cataloguing project we're going through to list those, particularly artifacts, because I know there are collections that have got personal letters from people who served in the war. I know that some of the family history collections have, for example, original medals within those. So when those are listed as artifacts, we'll be able to search the new archive catalogue on things like medals and diaries, and this will come up. So at the moment, we're waiting to. I'm sure there's much more to be explored for the armed services, but as a general overview, and you're right, it was a 40-minute talk, which I must manage to squeeze into 37 minutes. So I'll leave it there. I'll answer any questions. I've seen lots of comments and people interacting with each other. Sure, you can tell me what I've got wrong, but I hope this forms a reasonable overview of what we have in the Society's collections. So I'll stop sharing there and come to that.
All right, thank you, Elsa. In case I forgot to say, I think I did. We will continue recording while Kelly reads out the questions from the chat, of which I'm aware there are some. Hold on, where we go. Add Kelly to the spotlight. So over to you, Kelly. Thank you, Elsa, for a good 37 minutes worth.
I'm impressed you got all of that. I'm amazed. I'm amazed. Yes, we do have a few questions here, so let's try and get through them. The first one was asking if there was a handout, but Ruth replied saying that you usually send a copy of your slides.
Yeah, what we're doing, I'll give a copy of the slides, and then this will eventually become a collection guide that will go into the Society of Genealogists collection guides on the library pages of the website. So yes, you will find that will become the handout.
Right,
Yep.
thank you. And then Audrey asks, I presume you don't hold any records relating to the Royal Flying Corps, World War One.
Well, I've just looked up Royal Flying Corps. I did that as a subjects that in the advanced search, and we've got 80 items that crop up, but I only had half an hour. So I did the big ones really. So yes, there is material there, whether it's history of aces who flew in the First World War, or how the RAF evolved to mop up the various iterations of airmen and people who flew on behalf of Britain. Those background histories, um, histories of the Central Flying School, uh, a lovely history, a contemptible little flying corps being a definitive and previously non-existent role of those warrant officers, NCOs and airmen who served in the Royal Flying Corps prior to the outbreak of the First World War. So compiled by Ian McInnes, published by the London Stamp Exchange in 1991. And then for our purposes, that's counted as an RAF list. So RAF has a very broad definition of the things that got to being the RAF. So yes, but you can do the search in the catalogue and those things will come up.
Right. Yes, that actually cropped up in the chat a little bit further down
Yeah.
about when the RAF became
Exactly.
the RAF.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. We try to keep it simple for people. Maybe we've oversimplified it for the specialists here, but give us a chance.
Yeah. So the next question is, within the Army records, is there a list or index of diaries?
Not yet. No. You could do a keyword in the library catalogue under diary and arm. I'd perhaps do an advanced search, word diary, subject army, for example, and that might bring up some interesting things in the printed book collection, most certainly. But that's really only if the word diary appears in the title or any notes we put in the catalogue entry. For the archive material, because our archive collections are not as well catalogued as we'd like. I mean, there's no online catalogue yet. You've really only got the scanned images of the old paper lists. That'd be something more difficult to find, but with the new, it's something we're definitely doing and adding those tags where there are diaries and letters and things in the manuscript collections in the new catalogue that we're working on, but nowhere near yet ready to publish it yet. But that's something we're working on. But that's something I would do definitely as a search in the book in the library collection that looks at our books, CD-ROMs and microfiche, etc.
So it's all about being clever with the search engine.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Being patient and ready and waiting for the new Explore to come, which is exciting.
Yeah, SOG Explorer is developing all the time, and eventually, we hope that SOG Explore will make a one-shop search engine of all the archive material, all the digital collections, and the library catalogue. Hopefully, that's going to be a few years yet before paying to bolt on the library catalogue into SOG Explore is quite expensive, so we're not there yet.
So Audrey asks again about the Royal Air Force and the Royal Flying Corps, but we've covered that.
Yeah.
And then I think we just go on to thank yous, lots and lots of thank yous, Elsa.
Well, go play with the catalogue. I hope there's things there. We're happy to answer any questions you might have if you need any help in finding things in the catalogue, and the librarian will always help you identify and order things in for you. Sadly, not everything in there is ours to publish online. Though ours for copyright material, maybe we will, or put links to where our large runs of lists can be found on the Internet Archive, for example.
David has actually made a comment that looks pretty popular, actually. Could you perhaps, Elsa, do a few presentations where you pick through maybe half a dozen items at random that you think are in from one of the boxes?
Well, pick up a box, order in a box and see what there is.
I'd say the purists in me, I'm afraid, says that they can't be random if Elsa already thinks they're interesting. Anyway, at this point, I think, thank you, Elsa. I will stop the recording at this point, and
Okay.
but if people want to continue,
Yeah.
we'll